Welcome back to the Property Management Life podcast. I'm Eric Wetherington here with Josh Wetherington. We're glad to have you with us today. And today we've got a couple of things we want to talk about. First topic, what's the first thing we want to talk about today, Josh?
So today I want to ask you the question of someone that is starting off as a property manager, starting the property management company. How do you determine what kind of properties you want to be carrying in your portfolio?
Well, Josh, that's a great question. I certainly made these mistakes early on in my property management career, thinking that, well, if somebody has to live in it, then it's a property that I should manage. And so when I first started, we just took on anything that had a tenant and an owner, and the owner decided they didn't want to manage, they wanted a property manager. We said yes. And so we built our portfolio very quickly based on that philosophy of just continually adding, taking on anything anybody wanted to put out to us. But what we began to realize is when you're managing as a property manager, and most property managers typically charge a percentage of rent as their monthly fee. And so, the first and most obvious thing is obviously the percentage of rent on a $1,500 a month rental is a lot higher than the same percentage of rent on an $800 a month rental. So right off the bat, you're making a lot more money every month for your efforts on the $1,500 a month property than you are on the $800 property. Well, then the other thing that you don't realize until you really dig in and do the research and do the numbers, and in our portfolio, we started really looking at this, and we realized that the $800 a month property took 2 to 2.5 times the amount of work every month to manage that property than the $1,500 a month property. And so I quickly realized that it was a mistake to just take on everything that anybody offered us, and I needed to actually start being more selective about what properties we wanted to manage and the overall makeup of the properties in our portfolio. And that would ultimately help us provide better service to the clients that we were serving. It would make life a lot easier for the team that was working with me. And then also, obviously, then we would be able to be more profitable.
So if you were going to say, if there was, you can't really sum it down to this, but if there was one specific type of property that a property manager should be looking for as their ideal property, if you say, what would that be?
Well, I would start with really what's the market rent. So if you look at your market, if you look at the market that you're going to be operating in, what is the market average rent for a single family detached home? And find out what that number is. And then, in my experience, if you're managing properties that are 80% or greater to that average market rent, then you should be in pretty good shape. And, all other things being equal, you should be able to run a very profitable property management business. But if the market rent in your area is, let's just say the average rent is $2,000, okay? And you try to build a company based on managing properties that rent for $1,000, you're 50% below the market average, and it's going to be really difficult. You're going to have more staff. You're going to have you're going to have a lot more interactions every month with each tenant, and thereby with each owner, and it's going to take a lot more work. But if the market rent is $2,000 and you're focusing your efforts on properties that rent for $1,600-$1,700 a month on up, then you're going to have a portfolio that's ultimately going to require less work of you as the property manager, less interactions every month with each tenant and with each owner, and then that's going to result in higher satisfaction for your team and more profitability for your company.
So another question is, when you live in a town such as Charleston, where you have it's a big vacation spot, there's colleges, large workforce people working here. How do you determine like what your angle is rental. How do you determine, are we doing, more vacation rental, multifamily, single family, more towards, college kids? How do you determine that? And you're looking to start your company.
Well, it's important to remember that, all of those things are property management, but they're all different flavors and different slices of property management. So managing to a predominant target audience of college students is a whole different animal than managing to a standard single family rental. For example, some of my friends that do predominantly college housing for property management, they have, they have all of their move-ins happen in one weekend. So they have a weekend in July, usually end of June, 1st of July, where they do all their move-outs on Friday, and Saturday is cleaning day, and they have to get all their properties cleaned, and then Sunday is move-in day, and all of their new leases, move in and start on Sunday. So it's just it creates a nightmare of coordination, of being able to say, okay, we've got hundreds of houses or hundreds of properties that are turning over in this 3-day period of time, and we have to make this all happen. So that's one aspect of how college housing is a different animal. And then the other thing that he tells me about dealing with college housing is like, you get in college housing, you may have, let's say you have a 4-bedroom house. Well, they rent it by the bedroom. And so you've got 4 different students living in this house. And so, when the toilet, stops working, you get 4 phone calls, and then if you don't respond to that, quick enough, then you get phone calls from everybody's parents. And, and so it just, the amount of effort that goes into just dealing with one simple maintenance problem can be exponentially multiplied because there's so many more people involved.
Yeah. And what about vacation rentals?
Yeah, vacation rentals, I liken vacation rentals to running a hotel, except for every room in the hotel has a different street address. That's what a vacation rental is. So imagine all of the things that go into running a hotel. And imagine when you go to a hotel as a consumer, and if the air conditioner isn't working in the hotel, you pick up the phone, you call down to the front desk, and you expect someone to be at your door in 10 minutes to fix it. If there's a plumbing problem, if there's whatever, that's what you expect when you're at a hotel. And the same expectation of the customer is there in a vacation rental. Their expectation is, if there's a problem 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I can call somebody and somebody will be here immediately to fix it. And again, that means somebody has to get in their car and drive across town and then be ready to deal with the problem or deliver the service that is needed. So, man, vacation rentals is a difficult business. Now, I know some folks that have really put together a great network of people, and they can use that network to take care of maintenance issues and other issues with their vacation rental properties, and they can, do well at it. But it's a different line of business.
So we've determined, what we want our company to be. We've determined the type of properties that we want to be renting underneath that large umbrella of what we're doing. Are there any particulars you look for when it comes to find those houses? So are you looking for, properties that may already have a tenant in them, properties that don't have a tenant in them? Is there anything specific you're looking for in that?
Yeah, generally speaking, it's easier to get an unrented property because then you can get it up to the condition and standards that you have for your business, and then you can find a tenant and put that tenant in place. A lot of times when we take on properties, in my experience, when you take on properties that where tenants are already in place, there's a lot of bad habits and a lot of bad things that have to be changed when you're the new property manager. Maybe that tenant is used to just calling the owner for every little thing and every problem, and you got to break that cycle. You got to break that habit. Or maybe the tenant is used to not having to pay their rent on time, per the terms of the lease, and you got to break that habit. So, it can be challenging as a property manager to take on a property where there's a tenant already in place. But so ideally, you're looking for properties that need lease up, need that. Now, obviously, the nice thing about a tenant in place property, or a property where there's already tenants in place, is that's instant income. So you don't have to worry about having that property and working on it and having it sit vacant for a month or two before you start receiving income when rent comes in. So there is advantages to obviously having a property where there's a tenant in place, but there's disadvantages too. So it's not necessarily, I've never just gone out and said, well, I don't want to look for properties that have tenants in place. We just go out and look for quality properties that meet the rent criteria that we have set. And that's been the focus predominantly. And then we obviously we want to interview the owners and make sure those owners are a good fit, for us.
One thing I would say about that is if you're bringing on properties that already have a tenant, you need to treat that property just like if it was a vacant property. You need to be putting eyes on it, going through, inspecting that house before you decide if you want to take it on. Because what happens a lot of times is the owners, have had someone else managing this property. This person has been in the property for 8 years. They haven't really been bothering the owner, so the owner doesn't care. You take the property on, and all of a sudden, this person, isn't paying their rent. The house is, falling apart. It's in horrible condition. You may end up having to evict that longtime tenant, and then the owner's, losing out on tons of money, having to make all these repairs just because no one put eyes on the property before they brought it on, or eyes hadn't been put on the property during the duration of that time. Because at the end of the day, you don't know how another person was managing that property. So you can't go through expecting that, the previous management company was doing what you would do.
Well, that's a great point, Josh, that, and sometimes property managers forget every property that you manage is a reflection back on your company. And, when you have vacant properties out there and people go to those vacant properties and they're not, they're trashed, there's big stains in the carpets all over the place. There's, the walls aren't freshly painted and things like that. That's a reflection back on your company. And, as a property manager, it was always important to me to make sure that we took on good properties. Now, sometimes did we miss the boat and things slipped through? Sure. But for the most part, we really tried to make sure that we only signed up good quality properties, and it was the theory of, would I want my adult children to live in this property? Would I feel comfortable with my adult children living there? And if the answer was no, then it's probably something we shouldn't be managing. And, and so, you've got to have some standards. You got to have a rule of thumb, and you've got to remember that when you take on a property and it's not in great condition, if the owner doesn't want to bring it up to a condition or to a standard that is acceptable to you as the property manager, then it's probably not a property you want to be managing.
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing that and you bring that property on, and then all of a sudden it has all these issues, to the mind of the owner, you're the one tipping the apple cart. Because, I've had this property and this tenant in it for 8 years and I haven't had a problem. Now all of a sudden, I bring it to this management company and, there's all these issues that need to be taken care of. And even if that was a result of someone else before you not doing their job, you're the person there now. So in the owner's mind, Steve didn't call me with all these problems, and now you are. So even if it was Steve's fault for not calling with the problems, they're going to view it as, you're the one bringing all these things that need to be done to me.
Well, that's why interviewing the owner and really understanding the owner's motivations, the owner's thoughts, on maintenance and upkeep of the property, the owner's financial ability to provide maintenance and upkeep. Those are all important things to understand as the property manager before you agree to take on a property. The thing about being a property manager, you don't have to say yes to every owner or landlord that comes to you and says, "Hey, I want you to manage my property." You can say no. And not all owners are great owners. And not all owners understand the rules and the laws around property management. That's why you're the expert. That's why the property manager, needs to be the expert and needs to be careful. Just, interview that owner, get to know them, make sure that they are committed to maintaining a certain standard of quality for that property. Make sure that they have the financial resources to perform maintenance when it's needed, and make sure that they're willing to let you be the manager, let you be the expert, and they're not going to sit over your shoulder and tell you what to do at every turn.
I mean, it's really important to know what you're getting yourself into. I know of an owner that the management company signed this owner on. They had 2 properties, and in the span of the few first months of this owner's with the management company, both of their tenants got evicted, and the owner ended up maxing out 2 credit cards, paying to repair all these things that were on their house that, we totally miss out on that because you don't do your due diligence in the beginning when you're bringing on those properties and that owner.
Yeah,
and that's,
exactly.
That's never a situation that you want anyone to be in, because now he's 2 maxed out credit cards in debt because no one really did their job.
Yeah, and you can go on the internet and you can find books and you can find podcasts and YouTube channels and all this kind of stuff that tells you about how owning rental property is easy and how simple it is and how much money you can make and all those things. And yes, it can be a great investment, and yes, it can be a great way to build wealth long term for you and your family. But it's not without risk. Just like any investment, just like any business, it's a business. And there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be, good times, and there's going to be some lean times. And owning rental properties is just like that. And you've got to have the access to capital in order to weather those storms. I mean, we just went through COVID not too long ago. I think the White House is about ready to announce that the COVID emergency is over after 3 years or whatever it is now. And so, you've got, we just went through all of that, and there was a period of time during COVID where it was illegal to evict somebody from your rental property. So if you were a property owner and you had a mortgage and you had an insurance bill due and a tax bill due and, regular maintenance and upkeep for a property, the government said you can't expect to get a rent payment from your tenant, and you can't evict that tenant if they don't pay rent, but you still have to pay your mortgage, you still have to pay your taxes, you still have to pay your property insurance, and frankly, a good number of
that's the risk of banking on this rental income is what pays the mortgage.
Yeah, exactly. So, and
even
again,
even if it's not a government mandate, they just might stop paying their rent. That happens all the time. They might have lost their job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you look at the economy right now. Look at tens of thousands of people are losing their jobs. I mean, you look at Silicon Valley, look at Amazon and Salesforce and Google and Microsoft, and I mean, these folks are laying off thousands and thousands of people right now. And those are real people that live somewhere, and in some cases, will be challenged to make their next rent payment because of the circumstances until they find new jobs and whatnot. So those things happen, and as a landlord, you need to be ready for those things, and you need to have access to a stash of capital that can help you weather those storms.
I saw a video the other day, and I feel like it's an issue with a lot of the newer generation of influencers and whatever you call them, like wealth influencers, whatever. This guy talking about how, if you get a loan from a bank to buy a house for $120,000, and then you put $20,000 of work into the house, and then you make the house worth $200,000 with our magic money somehow, and then you do a cash out refinance, so you get $200,000 back. Now I somehow magically got $60,000 of free money, and then you just get a tenant that'll cover the mortgage, and then I take my $200,000 and buy another house and do it all over again, like it's some infinite money printing machine.
No, there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of people talking about that, and a lot of people, using leverage, good debt, what they call it, good debt and leverage and all this stuff.
Leveraging debt against debt is never wise.
To build real estate empires. And, personally, I'm much more conservative in that regard. Would much rather, pay cash or use, either pay cash or never use more leverage than what you can't exit out of a property for in 30 days. And so, if you think about it, if push came to shove, something happened, and I needed to sell a property in 30 days or less, what would I need to do? Well, I'd probably need to discount the sale price. And so, if I discounted the sale price, 10% or 20% even, because I just needed to exit out of it and get out of cash, though it's not going to do me any good if I have a 90% loan to value, And so, a conservative place to be is probably like 50%, So 50% down payment in cash, 50% leverage, 50% mortgage. And then if I have that across my portfolio, then there's probably no economy that would happen where I couldn't get out of that real estate and pay off the mortgage, and be debt free if I needed to get out in 30 days or less. Now, is that a really conservative position? Sure, it is. But, again, when's the next COVID, when's the next COVID virus going to hit us? Who knows? I mean, when is the next economic downturn? Well, we're in a tough economic times today. And so, unless you're just sitting on a huge pile of cash and you're using the debt just because, and you've got the cash to pay off all the mortgages, which I would say then just pay cash anyways, I would say. But it just,
When I saw that video, my thought is, if you go and do that process and get 3 or 4 rental properties, all it takes is, one, it doesn't take account in for the cost of owning a rental property. All it takes is, one air conditioning unit to go out, one water heater to go out. It's not even people not paying their rent. It just takes, one maintenance thing that you need to pay for, and your whole little business empire comes crumbling down.
Absolutely right. I mean, a water heater is, between, $1,600 and, $2,200. A typical air conditioning system today, $6,000 to $10,000, in our area, depending on, the size of the units and all of that. So, it doesn't take much to come up with a pretty significant sized maintenance bill for a rental property. And again, real estate takes investment. I mean, it takes money, it takes capital. If you're not spending, on average, roughly, 1% of the value of that real estate every year in improvements, capital improvements or general maintenance and upkeep, generally speaking, you're going to spend it at some point, So if you're not spending it, you should be saving it, because there will be a time where you will have to get out the checkbook and write a check to replace a water heater or replace a roof or, fix, a major, problem that's cost more than just a few $100.
Yeah, it might not even be a major problem. It might just be, okay, this person's been in this property for 3 years. They're out now. This house is, 15 years old. It was fine then, but maybe now we need to, upgrade, the lighting fixtures. Maybe the appliances are getting a little run down. Maybe we need to, paint the whole house so, it looks fresh. Yep. Things that you can do to improve your property to raise the rental price.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, painting a proper. I mean, painting a house. I mean, 3 or 4 grand. I mean, it's just and more certainly. I mean, it's not cheap. So there's a lot of expenses that go into owning real estate. A lot of advantages, a lot of tax advantages, a lot of advantages. But it's not just it's not like a money printing machine like some people on the internet make it out to be.
All right, so wrapping up this conversation, we're gonna go back and what is your main point? So when so our three was it the three things we talked about? How to determine the rental business you want to be in, how to determine the rental properties you want, and how to make sure that you're getting quality properties. A quick recap.
Yeah. Yeah, quick recap. I mean, I think the major point is if I'm in property management, I need to know what my minimum rent is before I'll even think about taking on a property. I need to have real clarity in my mind that I'm going to manage properties. I want my overall portfolio to, be, 80 to 90% of average market rent. And so, I'm going to be out looking for properties that rent at that number or higher. And I'm going to turn away. I'm going to say no to business. Even though it might be a lot of doors, I'm going to say no to those doors if the average rent doesn't help my portfolio. If it hurts my portfolio, then I'm going to say no. If it helps my portfolio and helps me maintain that average rent that I want to maintain in my portfolio, then it's a property worth considering. And then the second thing is don't forget to interview the owner. Make sure that the owner is a good fit for your company. Make sure that they're interested and have the capital to spend to take care of that property. And then lastly, make sure the property is a good fit. Make sure that when somebody looks at that property and they see your sign in the yard or they see your name, your company name on the internet with that property, that they're going to think positively of your brand and not think negatively because the property isn't cared for.